There is something happening inside you right now. Not a feeling you can name easily, more like a pressure behind everything. A quiet sense that the life you are living and the life you are meant to live are not quite the same thing. If you have ever felt that, you have already begun. Spiritual awakening is not a single moment. It is not a flash of light or a sudden peace that descends from nowhere and never leaves. It is a progression, a series of openings, each one stranger and harder and more beautiful than the last. And the reason most people feel lost inside it is not because they are doing it wrong. It is because nobody showed them the map. There are 5 stages. Most people move through all of them, some more than once. And there is one stage in particular where people get stuck for years. Not because they are weak, because it is the hardest one to understand while you are inside it. As I walk you through each stage, notice which one feels familiar. That recognition alone can bring something close to relief. Stage 1, the sleeping. This is where almost everyone begins. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. You have a life, maybe even a good one. But somewhere underneath the routine, the work, the relationships, the small obligations that fill each day, there is a sound. Not loud, more like a frequency, a low, persistent hum that says, "This is not it. This is not all there is." You cannot explain it to anyone because from the outside, everything looks fine. And that is part of what makes it so disorienting. You are not in crisis. You are not suffering in any obvious way, but you are haunted by a feeling that you are living someone else's life, that you agreed to a version of yourself before you really understood what you were agreeing to. Sometimes it surfaces in small, specific moments. A Sunday afternoon that feels inexplicably hollow. A conversation that leaves you more tired than it should. A moment of watching other people laugh and feeling, underneath your own smile, a distance you cannot explain. You are present and absent at the same time. There, but not fully there. The mind, which is very good at protecting you, will offer explanations. You are tired. You need a vacation. You need a new job, a new relationship, a new city. And sometimes those things help, briefly. But the hum returns. Because the hum is not about your circumstances. It is about your frequency. It is the soul signaling that it is ready for something the surface of life cannot provide. This stage can last for years, decades sometimes. The soul is patient. It will keep sending the signal until you finally stop explaining it away. The sleeping is not a failure. It is the ground from which everything else grows. Stage 2, the crack. Something breaks. It does not always look like breaking from the outside. Sometimes it is a loss, a relationship that ends, a version of yourself that suddenly cannot continue. Sometimes it is quieter, a morning when you wake up and something that used to feel solid simply is not there anymore. Mystics across traditions have a name for this, the dark night of the soul. It is the phase where the old structure stops holding, where the identity you built around yourself becomes too small to contain what is trying to emerge. And because humans are afraid of the dark, we were trained to be, most people interpret this as collapse, as failure, as evidence that something has gone very wrong. It has not. The crack is not the end of something. It is the entrance. The ego, which has spent years constructing a story about who you are and what you need to be safe, begins to lose its grip. This can feel like grief, like confusion, like being unmoored from everything that used to make sense. It can feel like depression, or like anxiety that has no specific object. Like you are standing at the edge of something vast, without knowing whether to step forward or step back. What makes this stage particularly difficult is that the people around you often cannot see what is happening. From the outside, you may look like you are struggling, like you are falling apart. They will offer advice, solutions, reassurances that things will return to normal. And you will sense somewhere underneath the discomfort that normal is exactly what you cannot go back to. That something in you has crossed a threshold and the crossing was permanent. If you are in this stage right now, and some of you are, the most important thing to understand is this: what is falling apart is not you. It is only the shell, and the shell was never who you were. Stage 3. The Seeker. Something shifts. The disorientation begins to move toward curiosity. The questions that used to feel frightening start to feel alive. Who am I beneath the person I was taught to be? What is this awareness that watches my thoughts without being the thoughts? What is the energy that moves through the world, and sometimes, in certain moments, I can almost feel? You begin to reach books, teachers, practices, meditation perhaps, or long walks where something loosens inside you. You feel drawn toward knowledge you cannot fully explain, ancient things, hidden things, the edges of what the rational mind can hold. For the first time in a long time, you feel genuinely awake. This is the honeymoon of the awakening journey, and it is beautiful. There is a particular kind of aliveness that comes from being a seeker, from feeling that you are finally moving towards something true. But this stage carries its own shadow. The trap of the seeker is accumulation, collecting wisdom like objects, moving from teacher to teacher, tradition to tradition, always searching for the teaching that will finally complete you. The seeker can become addicted to seeking, because arriving would mean sitting with yourself in the silence, and that is still, sometimes, the hardest thing of all. You can spend years here, genuinely growing, genuinely expanding, and still using the search itself as a way to stay in motion, because motion feels like progress, and stillness feels like you might finally have to face whatever is underneath all the seeking. The seeker is not wrong for seeking, but at some point, the path turns inward, and no book can take you there. Stage 4. The Dissolution. This is the stage where people get lost, and it is the most important one to understand. You have done the work. You have read the books, sat with the discomfort, begun to question the stories you were handed. You feel, some days, like you are genuinely changing. And then something old resurfaces, a pattern you thought you had healed, a reaction you thought you had outgrown, a darkness you believed you had already walked through. It can feel like you are going backward. Like after all this effort, you have arrived back where you started. It can feel like proof that none of it was real. It is not proof of that. It is the deepest part of the process. What is happening in this stage is dissolution, the layers of the old self releasing one by one at depth. Carl Jung called it individuation. The mystics called it surrender. What they all mean is this: the parts of you that were shaped by fear, by conditioning, by the need to be safe in a world that sometimes was not, they are being released. Not because you forced them out, because you finally stopped holding on. This stage asks you to grieve, not dramatically, quietly. To grieve the version of yourself that worked so hard to be acceptable. To grieve the strategies that kept you safe, but also kept you small. To grieve the time you spent waiting for permission to be who you already were. The dissolution asks something that feels almost impossible: to stop trying to control the process. To trust that what is falling away was ready to fall. To let the river carry you without knowing exactly where you are going. This is where the energy of surrender becomes real, not as a concept, as a lived experience, as the slow recognition that the more you grip, the harder it gets, and the more you open, the more arrives. Stage 5. The knowing. This is not the end. There is no end. But there is a quality of being that becomes available on the other side of dissolution, and those who have touched it describe it in remarkably similar ways across every tradition, every culture, every era of human history. A quietness underneath the noise, a sense of being held by something larger without needing to name that something. The capacity to be present, not perfectly, not always, but more and more, without being swept away by the current of the mind. A recognition that you are not separate from the world but woven into it, that every moment of apparent isolation was a teaching in disguise. The 5th stage is not a state of constant bliss. People who have reached it still have hard days, still grieve, still feel fear. But there is a witnessing awareness underneath all of it, something that watches without being caught, something that knows, even in difficulty, that it is okay, that this too is part of the unfolding. The synchronicities become undeniable. The right people arrive at the right moment. Doors open that were not visible before. Not because the universe suddenly decided to cooperate, but because your frequency shifted and what was always available to you can now actually reach you. You stopped blocking the signal, and something else happens at this stage. You become, almost without trying, a presence for others. Not because you are performing wisdom, but because the energy of someone who has walked through the dark and arrived somewhere real. That energy is felt. It lands. It gives other people permission to believe that their own crack might also be an entrance. Here is what I want to leave you with. You do not have to know which stage you are in to be in the right place. The stages are not a hierarchy. Being in stage 2 is not worse than being in stage 4. Each one contains exactly what that moment of the journey requires. Each one is the path, not a detour from it. And the fact that you watched this all the way to the end, that matters. The part of you that wanted to find itself in these words is the same part that has been driving everything. It was awake in the sleeping. It was present in the dark night. It is the thing underneath all the searching that the searching was always pointing toward. It was never lost. You were just learning to recognize it. Trust it. You already know more than you think. If something in this video felt true for you, if you recognized yourself in one of these stages, subscribe. There is more here for you. And tell me in the comments, which stage are you in right now? Or which one surprised you to recognize in yourself?